Now we've gotten to the point in the program that everybody's been waiting for. Shirley? Tonight we've got Scott Farrington. He's the Chief of Staff for the Manatee County Elections. Scott served as the Chief of Staff since January 2013. His extensive elections and information technology experience are vital to a current and future operations of that organization. Scott spent 10 years at the Sarasota County Supervisor of Elections Office, beginning in 2000. For 2 years prior to joining the Manatee County Elections team, Scott worked for a software developer, Veritex in Sarasota. Scott was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and bless his heart, he got to draw and came south, which also shows he's a pretty smart guy, as is evidenced by a lot of you. No, I'm serious. Don't you? Have you? Anybody in here shovel snow recently?
No, but I remember.
Very clearly.
Ergo, you're here. Scott was born in Fort Wayne, moved to Sarasota with his family in 1986, graduated from Community Christian High School in Onico, Florida. He's got 2 degrees from USF. He's got a BS in Information Systems Management, a master's in Managing Information Systems. Scott and his wife, Amy, have been married since 2008, and they have 1 son, Jacob. Scott, come enlighten us.
So thank you for the introduction. As you can tell, I am not the Supervisor of Elections of Manatee County. That is Mike Bennett. He apologizes for not being able to be here. He just got back from Iowa, where his wife's family is. But I'm happy to be here. A little bit of back information about the office. I'm sure most of you know this, but to go through it real quick. The Supervisor of Elections is a constitutional office. They're elected to 4-year terms. They are not directly under the county commission. However, we do receive our funds directly from the county commission, so there's a little give and take there that always goes on. Mike Bennett was elected in 2012, took office in 2013. He was re-elected in 2016 and also in 2020. He is up for election again in this year. What do we do the other 364 days out of the year? That's probably the most common question I get asked when I'm out and about and talking to different people. So this is kind of a brief list of what we do. As you can imagine, we still have to process voter registration applications. People are still moving into Manatee County. They're still turning 18. They're still dying. All of that stuff we have to take care of. And so that is probably the majority of what our office does during the off time. We also do what we refer to as list maintenance. We're required by law to do a yearly list maintenance program. This year was the first year Senate Bill 524 changed that list maintenance a little bit. We were required to send every voter who has not voted in the last 2 general elections. So at that time it would have been, had not voted in 2020 or 2022, and we had not otherwise heard or had any communication with that voter, we were required to send them a piece of mail. And that piece of mail, they were required to check a box, sign it, and return it to us to stay registered. If they did not do that within 30 days, we made them inactive. This was the first year that we were required to follow that exact procedure. There's other things that we've been doing in the past, but this year was a little different. And what that resulted in was that we made approximately 30,000 people inactive in around July or August of this year.
Very good.
So that was 30,000 people that had not had any activity with our office in the last 2 general elections. That does not mean that they're not eligible to vote. Does not remove them from the rolls. It puts them in an inactive status. That's a little bit of a misconception or something that you may have heard in the news. They weren't purged, they're made inactive. They stay inactive for 2 more general elections. So for 2024 and 2026. If we have not heard anything from that voter in that time period, then they get removed. And in order to vote past that, they have to re-register. So we removed approximately, or not removed, we made inactive approximately 30,000 people. So our rolls went from about 280,000 people to right around 250,000 in August. Since August, it's back up to 265,000. So that 15,000 is most likely it's those same people who just didn't get that, they procrastinated or didn't get the letter initially and have since communicated back with our office and moved back. And so we're sitting at around 365,000 voters.
Scott, what happens if they show up and want to vote?
If that person goes to vote, they are in inactive status, they are not removed, as long as the law requires them to confirm their address with our office, basically their name, their address, so that we know that who they are and where they're registered, and then they're allowed to vote. So there's really no difference. If you showed up and you were inactive, you wouldn't even know that we had you as inactive.
And they don't get mail-in ballots?
They can request one, and if they request a vote by mail ballot, it turns them active again, and then they would get one. But as soon as you become inactive, that removes any request, vote by mail request from the record. We also do municipal and special elections during the off season. We didn't really have any this year, which was unusual. We take care of the candidates, the committees and parties. As you know, there's been a lot of candidates filing recently. Our office deals with all of that paperwork and the financial reporting. We do voter education, we do voter outreach, we do this type of activity. And then of course, we also take care of like the voting equipment repairs and maintenance and all that sort of thing. Kind of touched on this already, but it's interesting to me, and I hope it's interesting to you. When I came into office in 2013, we had a little over 212,000 registered voters. Currently today, we're at 265,000 registered voters. So in approximately 10 years, we've gone up 50-ish thousand registered voters. And remember, that's after dropping that 30,000, and now we're back up to 265,000. I think this is the part that you're going to find interesting. If you look towards the bottom where it talks about the party breakdown, and this is Manatee County in 2013. 43% of the county was Republican, 33% was Democratic, and 25% was no party affiliation or a minor party. Today, it is 47% Republican, 26% Democratic, and 27% something else, no party affiliation. This is the first time in the history that no party affiliation voters have risen above one of the major parties. So take that as you will, but that is the way it stands right now. Something else that's interesting to note about Florida, which is different in Florida than it is in most states. The smallest county in Florida is Liberty County. Currently has about 4,500 registered voters in the whole county, 4,500 registered voters. The largest county is Miami-Dade with 1.45 million registered voters. So the state is very, very diverse. You've got the very small counties to the very large, and the laws are frequently written in a way that tries to accommodate both of those. And sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. Again, something just kind of interesting to me, so I hope it's interesting to you, is let's look at it at a statewide level. In 2013, there was almost 12 million voters in Florida. Now there's 13.5 million, so 1.5 million growth in about 10 years of registered voters. And then the party breakdowns, if you'll look, the trend is the same in Manatee County as it is statewide. The Republican have bumped up a little bit, but mostly the Democratic registered voters have dropped, and no party affiliation has increased. So 10 years ago, there were about 5% more Democrats registered in Florida. Today, there's 5% more Republicans registered in Florida. How do people choose to vote? In Florida, you have 3 ways to vote. Vote by mail, early voting, and then also going to the polls on election day. First, I want to take a second and talk about early voting. Early voting is a term that nationwide has been used for any type of voting that happens before election day. So that would include vote by mail, that would include what we traditionally in Florida call early voting. Early voting in Florida statutorily refers to that window before the election where you can go vote in person. So those are the 3 methods: vote by mail, early voting, and election day. I'm not going to go over this too hard, but I want to look at 2 trends. One is the increase of early voting and the increase of vote by mail and the decrease of the polling place voting. 2020 is not the best election to compare this on because as much as I'm sure you've tried to forget it, 2020 was coronavirus. Everybody, just it threw everything in a whirlwind. So vote by mail did go up at a pretty significant rate, which is probably not a good comparison. And people chose to vote at the polls less, but the trend is still there. If you look 10 years ago, or now closer to 14 years ago, 60% of people that voted at the polls. In 2020, only 20% of the people that voted on election day. Now, because 2020 and 2022 aren't the best judges, we're not really sure what to expect in 2024, but we know it's not going to jump back up to 60%. Will it be higher than 20%? Probably, but probably closer than the 25 to 30% of the people that vote are going to vote on election day. Everybody else is going to vote before the election day ever comes about. There's been, vote by mail has seen trends up and down. It's seen different parties have seen it differently. And I don't know what the feeling in the room is, but currently, as I understand it, the Florida Republican Party is pushing vote by mail. It's pushing early voting, pushing both of those methods. So we see that as this trend increasing so that by election day, most of the people that are going to vote have already voted. Presidential turnout. So this is probably a little hard for you to read, but that is basically the turnout for a PPP. PPP is a presidential preference primary. That's the blue line. You can see it kind of bobbles around. A primary, and then the general election. Mostly what I want you to take out of this is that for the primaries, a 25% turnout is a really good primary turnout. For a general election, we usually get above, for the last quite a while, we've been getting well above 70%, 70 to 80%, which is nationwide is a really good turnout. But I really wanted to focus on the primary. It's still a low turnout. It's been a low turnout for as long as I know, and it's only groups like this that are going to increase that turnout. People have to feel the need for the primary to be important to them to increase the turnout. This is one of the things, presidential preference primaries, March 19th. And I'm still fascinated by the number of people I talk to that I know that are pretty smart people that have no idea there's an election in March. So again, it's groups like this that help get that information out. But this is what this is who you're going to see on that ballot. When you go to the polls, or if you vote by mail or early voting, on March 19th, this is what you're going to see. If you're a Republican, which I'm guessing everybody in here is, I could be wrong, you're going to have a choice of 7 people. If you're a Democratic candidate, you won't even have a ballot. There is no election for Democratic ballots or for Democratic voters because there's only one candidate. Why is it listed?
Why is it
Okay, Kennedy. Kennedy he is not on the Democratic ballot. Because he's not on the ballot, he's not registered as a Democrat. If he chooses to run, he will run as an MPA, an independent, or a libertarian. They don't have primaries in Florida. Only major parties have primaries, presidential primaries in Florida. So you will not see Kennedy on the ballot, any ballot. He will not appear on the ballot. One of the questions I always get asked is, we have 7 candidates on this ballot. Some of them have already kind of said they're not running anymore. Why are they still on the ballot? Well, if they withdrew their candidacy for nomination, they would be removed from the ballot. But one of the little quirks to presidential preference primaries is presidential candidates never withdraw. They suspend their campaign. And the little quirk there is that means that they are technically a candidate. I don't know if they're just hoping for a miracle from God or what, but they will still be on the ballot. And as this goes on, this ballot, this election in March 19th, we're required to mail that overseas 45 days before the election. So first week in February, we're going to be mailing out ballots. Even if people start dropping, one, they haven't officially dropped, they've just suspended their campaign. And two, we've already printed the ballots, so we can't take their name off of it. So this is what the ballot is going to look like. It's going to have all 7 of those candidates. Upcoming elections, we again have the presidential preference primary, March 19th. Vote closing for that is February 20th. Vote closing is the date in which you must be registered to vote in Florida in order to vote in that election. And not only must you be registered to vote, you must be registered in the party that you want to vote in this primary. So if you want to vote March 19th, you must be registered a Republican by February 20th. Early voting will happen between March 9th and March 16th. There's the primary election August 18th, but closing is July 22nd. The early voting will be August 10th through 17th.
August 20th.
You're right.
That was a test. You passed.
Oop-de-doo.
Sorry about that. And then, of course, the general election, November 5th. Vote closing is October 7th. And then early voting is October 21st through November 3rd. Just ignore that. So what other things might be of interest to you? The new list maintenance, I kind of talked about that already. This was the first year that we were required to do that particular type of list maintenance. We've always been doing list maintenance. And what list maintenance mostly consists of is getting lists from the post office. What we have found is when you move from one state to another, or one county to another, or even one house street to the other, you're not very good at telling us. But what you are really good about is making sure your mail, the USPS knows to move your mail. So we get a lot of our information about where and when people move from the post office. Another thing that I think you'll be interested in is there are currently definitely 2 amendments on the November ballot. That'll be one that will require all school board members to run in a partisan race, declare as a Republican or a Democrat or independent. The right to fish and hunt, marijuana, the legalization of marijuana for personal use. That one currently was challenged. The state attorney general challenged it. It was heard by the state Supreme Court in November. We haven't heard what their ruling is yet. I assume it'll probably be this month that we'll hear that. And then the last one is there is a petition, an initiative petition going around for abortion. It basically limits how far the state can make abortion illegal. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm not really an expert on it, but it makes it viability. It sets viability as the time in which the state can set a law for it. Right now, they need approximately 890,000 petitions in the state of Florida. They currently have 860,000 verified, and I know our office has about 4,000 of them that they just gave us to verify, and we're 1 of 67. They have said they have enough out to get on the ballot. I believe that they're probably right. So the Attorney General has also said they're going to challenge this one. So I'm sure that will go to the Supreme Court as well for their determination on whether it can go to the ballot. But right now, those are the 4 amendments that you would likely see on your ballot. The legislature can always add more, though. So there has been talk about a couple others, but I haven't seen any bills or anything on them specifically.
What's the deadline for
The petitions had to be in our office by today. We have to have them verified to the state by February 2nd. So like I said, we got 4,000 in the last week and a half. We have 30 days to verify. So only going by what the person who turns them into our office has said, they said that they have more than enough outstanding across the state that they're pretty confident it'll hit it. Again, they only need 30,000 more. They got 4,000 sitting in our office waiting to go through the process. They've been seeing about a 60 to a 70% acceptance rate. So out of the 40,000 we get, 2,500, 3,000 would probably be good. They only need 30,000. Chances are pretty good they're going to hit that number. Whether it'll go through the Supreme Court and pass that, that's someone else's job to tell. Yes?
What is the right to fish and hunt all about?
You know, I don't really know. Generally speaking, it has something to do with counties and municipalities cannot limit your right to hunt under certain waterways and state-owned property, something like that. I'm not really that sure on it. I don't know, someone else in here might be more. The state legislature put that forward as a constitutional amendment last year, and I honestly just didn't look into it that hard. Vote by mail. I did talk about vote by mail a little bit. As you probably are aware, all vote by mail requests that we had on file expired the end of 2022. At that point in time, we had over 100,000 vote by mail requests on file. To date, we're at about 38,400 vote by mail requests. So does that mean only 38,400 people are going to vote by mail? No. It means that they haven't heard about it yet. They don't care about it yet. They're just not interested yet. Nothing has sparked them to re-request that vote by mail. Is it going to get back to 100,000? Probably not. My guess is for the general election, it'll probably be in the 70,000 range. It's kind of what we're expecting. But again, that's kind of anybody's guess at this point. We're really not sure. And that's kind of, I do have one other thing I'm going to talk about because it came up at the table I was sitting at. But there's a young gentleman here named Preston, and he asked basically, how can I be involved? And he's 14, so he's still a little young. But one thing that a lot of people don't know is at 16, when you get your driver's license, you can also register to vote. You can't vote until you turn 18, but you can do what's called pre-registry. And once you're pre-registered to vote, you can be a poll worker. So a program that we've been trying to get off the ground and push forward is having what we call student poll workers, where usually it's the 11th and 12th graders, but at 16, you're legally allowed to do it. You can come and work for us as a poll worker. And we found that the ones that we have done, we've had about 100 students over the last 4 years go through this. They love it. It gets them out of school for a day. They get about 100, I can't remember, it's $125 or $150 pay for that day. So they get a little bit of spending money. And then they also get a few hours of community service, thank you. So most of the students love it. Our poll workers love it because they have a young, fresh face in there to help them out and to give them it. So if you have any kids, grandkids, friends, family, and they're of that 16 to 18-year-old age, and they're still in school, they can be a poll worker and have them contact our office. We are trying to work through the schools as well. The schools are kind of hit or miss how much they'll help us get into it. Usually there's a teacher who's like a civics teacher or something like that is where we get our best help in the schools, but it is something that we're working on. So, and I know Jack May has expressed some interest in helping us out in that as well. So that's all I have for now. I'm sure I know this group, they have questions, so I'll answer what I can. Okay.
No, it's on, as long as the red light's on, you're good.
Scott, hey Scott, this is Jim. Thanks for coming. We've met Mike a couple of times before, and it was long and experience. A couple things. How would you rate our voter rolls? How pure are the voter rolls today?
How pure are our voter rolls? So I don't know how you classify that per se. If you want an A, B, C kind of thing, I'd give us a B+.
There's a lot of conversation around making the voter rolls good.
Mm-hmm.
So they're accurate. How accurate are our voter rolls today?
So how accurate are the voter rolls? That's a hard question to answer, and I'll tell you why it's a hard question to answer. One is, I know how many people we took off, that was 30,000. I know how many people we put back on, that's 15,000. but how many of those people want to be back on and will be back on before the general? There's no way to know the exact right answer, so there's no way to know exactly where we're at. Having said that, I think we're pretty darn good. We do a lot of list maintenance. We do more than the state requires, but we do the list maintenance as much as we can. Is it perfect? No. I can tell you, having worked in the elections office in Sarasota or Manatee for the last 20 plus years, 23 years, the process has increased. The resources available to us have increased beyond. In 2000, when I started, the only way we knew someone had died, we went through the obituaries. Every day, that was somebody's job to go through the obituary. And they would go down, look for the name up, and see, oh yeah, this person, he's dead. Date matches, name matches, we'll take them off the list. That was all we had.
Let me ask you one other follow-up question. How well did Eric go here in making those voter rolls as good as it did?
Eric was a double-edged sword for us in some regards. We got a lot of good information off of Eric. What I don't know is how much bad information we got. The way Eric was set up was so that all the information went to the state. None of it went directly to the county. The state then did their magic and then sent us basically a list and told us what to do with it. So how good was it? I don't really know. I just know what we got, and generally it did help. We did remove, and where it really helped is if you were registered in multiple states. If you moved down from Ohio, moved to Florida, hadn't told Ohio that you moved, we had you registered, Ohio had you registered. That's where we saw the biggest benefit, is finding people that were registered in multiple states.
How much benefit did we get versus the competition?
I'm assuming by the competition you're talking about parties. We did not see a huge, I think the fear was, honestly, and I think this is where you're going, the fear was that the people that were either Eric or the state, because for us, we didn't really know what the data was when it started, we just know what it was when we got to us. The fear was someone was kind of cherry picking one party over the other. I could tell you from our looking at it, I mean, we're 40% Republican, and the numbers kind of seem to match the total registrations, mostly. It wasn't perfect. The other thing that is hard to look, and I have a slide on this because it gets kind of into the weeds, but if you look at the demographics of the different people that are registered in the different parties, right? If you look at those who are registered Republicans, they're 40, 50, 60 and above. There's not a lot of 20, 30, and 40-year-olds registered as Republican. The higher you get, I guess you smarten up. I don't know.
Let me ask you one question. How many people came across the southern border were voting in our elections?
So so you're talking about citizenship. What I'm gonna tell you, citizenship is one of those things, again, going back to 2000 when I started, there was no citizenship check. None, zero, zilch. If you check the box on the application, that's all we had to go by. Today, what we have, we do not have the resources I wish we had. Department of Homeland Security does not give us a list of those known aliens or unknown aliens.
They don't know.
My point being, we don't have, the only database we have access to is DMV. DMV, if you had asked me 10 years ago, was horrible. Today, it's actually pretty good. And it goes back to the Real ID, if you're familiar with Real ID. In Florida and nationwide, in order to get a driver's license, you have to provide a certain amount of documentation to prove that you are who you say you are. One of those things is a birth certificate or a passport. If you have a passport, you've provided your birth certificate in order to get the passport. So if you have the Real ID, we have pretty high confidence that you're either a citizen or not a citizen. That is all tracked through Florida Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. And so that is what we have. So what I'm gonna tell you is we do, I know, because every year one or two come up, and usually the way we find them is they are registering to try and gain citizenship. When you try and get citizenship, one of the things that is done is they ask the county in which you live, or actually the state, for proof that they either are or are not registered to vote. And I know for a couple of people, it kept them from getting their citizenship because they were registered to vote and they voted in an election as an illegal alien. So it kept them from getting their citizenship, and they weren't allowed to apply, I think it was for another 5 years or something along those lines. So I know that there are some, but I also know that that number has never been very large, but it is decreasing. The better the DMV database gets, the better I can guarantee that there are non-citizens voting.
Hopefully AI is gonna help us out with this, right?
I don't know about that, but yes, there are people working on AI and trying to get their, there are companies that are focused on that.
Hey, thanks for coming. My question is, I recently watched Secretary of State talk to a committee up on Capitol, or the Capitol rather, and he was talking about, the machines are, they're certified and everything, and that he follows this, and the whole state follows this, and of course the law says you gotta have the cybersecurity up, he admitted that they don't. So my question is, if that is true, how often do you guys, because if you look at it, when we started peeling back the onion, it's 2005 standards is what he was doing, so that means you could have an XP and you could have the 7, which are deprecated operating systems. As an IT person, you should, you're familiar with that. So my question to you is, how often do you pen test, and how often do you update the software and firmware on those machines? And have you ever done a man-in-the-middle test? As a cybersecurity guy, I can tell you, if you guys are not doing any of that, those machines are very vulnerable. And he was admitting that they do have modems in them. So, and whether or not saying it's on the internet to a cyber guy is kind of BS, because your phone has a modem in it, just on the net, so that you can still get into it. So that's my questions.
Okay, so there's a lot of questions there. That wasn't one question. I'm gonna start by telling you what I think you already know, and that is the way it works in Florida is Florida must certify the system before we're allowed to use it. When they certify, and right now there are only 2 companies in Florida that are certified. They have maybe 3 versions, two from one company and 2 from the other company. They're versions of their software that is certified. Those certifications include the operating system. It includes all of the firmware, all of the levels. We are not allowed to change those operating systems and levels until the state recertifies it.
So they're never updated.
So they are not updated until the state recertifies it with a new version. The assurance that I'm going to try and give you, and I can tell you probably isn't going to satisfy you, they are not on the internet. They never touch the internet. And I know you're not going to believe me, but they don't. Do they have a modem in them? Yes, they do. The truth is, I would be fine taking it out. I don't really care. You know why I don't care? It doesn't save me any money, and it doesn't save me any time. Not a minute. As a matter of fact, it costs me more time. Why is it there? Because in Florida, the US in general, any election that you don't know the result of that night, there's a problem with that election. There you go. That is the perception. That is what we have come to as a society, basically. Yes. We have decided that if you don't know the result that night, there is a problem. Yep. The only way for us to get you the results that quickly is to have those modems.
Jarvis Williams. I just recently went to the Department of Motor Vehicles and upgraded my voting record and my license, etc. And people are flying in and out of there. And if you were somebody that was just observing, making observation, you say, well, there's probably a lot of illegal people in there. Anyway, that's my feeling. But your boss told us in a talk here a couple of years ago that he answered a direct question. I said, can you assure me that illegals are not voting for us? He said, no.
So you're asking me the same question?
Yes.
Okay. Can I assure you there are no illegals registered to vote in Florida? No, I cannot assure you that. And until we have a method to verify that you are a citizen before we register you, I will never be able to assure you that. Now understand, prior to 1996 in Florida, in order to register to vote, you had to show up in person. You had to provide certain identification with you in order to register in Florida. There was I'm sure most of you will be familiar with it, there was what was called the Motor Voter Act. It took effect in 1996. What that meant was now you can register at DMV. When you get your driver's license, when you change your driver's license, you can also do your voter registration. The other thing that went along with that, though, was it removed the requirement, and not only did it remove the requirement, it removed us from making it a requirement that you appear in person. There are tons of voters that we have never seen, will never see. So the only way I could ever assure you is if we could also ask for some of the same information that DMV asks for, like a birth certificate, a passport, some other piece of information. Right now, that's illegal. I can't ask for that. I mean, honestly, as I understand it, have been told, it's a constitutional rights issue. Your right to vote is a constitutional right. If I were to ask you to come and provide that information, I would be infringing upon that right in order to do so. It would be a step above what you need to produce. It goes along with the poll tax. We can't, we've had the requirement in Florida to have voter or identification, produce identification when you vote. When you go to the polls, you have to produce identification. It's been a requirement in Florida for a long time. A lot of states have tried to add it. They've basically said, no, you can't add it because it's a poll tax. You have to get, it puts a hindrance on voters to go to DMV in order to get that ID, in order for them to have the right to vote. You are hindering their right to vote. The only way that Florida gets away with it, or around that, is they allow more options for ID than just your driver's license.
So the answer is no.
What I'm saying is, the better the DMV is, the better we are at finding them. But I cannot guarantee you there is no illegal citizen that's registered to vote. And the only way I ever could is if I could also require that information. Having said that, I don't want to scare you into like there's hundreds of thousands of illegals registered to vote. There really isn't.
There might be this year.
What's that?
Said there might be this year.
Well, this is what I'm saying. In order to register to vote now, and to register to vote, all of your information is compared against DMV. And if that doesn't match, if it says you're not a citizen, you're not allowed to register to vote anymore. Anybody that is illegally here and registered did so probably more than 10 years ago. Yes.
But when you go to the poll worker class, you can actually give like a student ID or the back of a credit card. Well, I don't understand the back of a credit card being that anybody can get a credit card or a bank card. I don't understand that form of ID. The school one doesn't prove you're a citizen either.
Well,
so really,
that requirement, that statutory requirement to produce ID when you vote is not, the requirement is not intended to make sure that you're a citizen. The requirement is intended to make sure you are the person you are presenting yourself to be. your picture matches and your signature matches.
I mean, shouldn't the main requirement be that you're a US citizen? Not who you say you are. I mean, I could say I'm anybody. I could probably open a credit card in someone else's name, actually. But you know, the main requirement to vote should be that you're a US citizen. That should be the main, number one.
And it is a requirement to register to vote. What I'm trying to express is that it's not at the point in which you present that ID that is being checked. It is being checked when you register to vote. At that point, when you go to the polls, the reason that we ask for the ID is to verify that you are the person you say, not whether or not you're a citizen. That was checked earlier. The other thing I'm gonna say is the reason it's not limited to federal ID, such as a Florida driver's license or a Florida ID, is back to where I was saying that every other state that has tried to limit it to that has gotten ruled it's unconstitutional because it puts basically a poll tax or a hindrance on the voter.
That's still backwards to me, because it's more of a hindrance to the citizens, to let people who are non-citizens vote.
I'm not gonna argue
Oh, I know.
against you. I'm just trying to
It just
explain.
doesn't make common sense. It's just not common sense to me, but I get what you're saying. This doesn't make sense.
When do you get your digital ID?
Oh, I'm not gonna get one. It won't be me that gets a digital ID, trust me.
Thanks for coming out tonight. A couple weeks ago, I forget how long it was, I read an article, or saw an article, I think it might have been in the Observer or something, saying that Mike Bennett was the stingiest person around, meaning that 10 years ago, the budget was 1.2 million, now it's like 1.3 million or something, it's gone up very low.
Right.
In your term, the 10 years that you've been there now, explain, since you are as chief of staff, you've had very little turnover because there are very few people, I've never seen an article saying we're hiring. Everyone is pretty much there and they've been there for 20, 10 plus years, whatever. Explain that within your office, since you've been there, the budget increase or less increase, whatever. And, the type of people that you do you have much turnover? Because I haven't seen much myself.
Going to the budget directly, it was the Observer that ran the article. I don't remember exactly what the numbers are, but when we started in 2013, the budget was about 2.9 million, if I remember correctly. And this last budget, we asked for 3.1 million. So over 10 years, I don't know what that percentage is, but it's pretty low. Most of that budget increase, I'm going to tell you right now, has gone to salaries, which is kind of leads into your second question. We don't have a huge amount of turnover, and part of the reason is because we try and treat our employees well. I mean, I'm not going to say we've never had someone retire, because we have, or leave because we have, but it's not a lot. And we're a small office, right? We have about 16 full-time employees plus the supervisor of elections. So it's not like we're the county who's hiring 100 people every other day.
Firing them.
Like 150 of them.
So
Small government.
you're not gonna, naturally, we wouldn't have a lot of turnover anyway, but either way, we don't. Yes.
Can you speak to some of the issues involved in absentee voting?
Speak to some of the issues involved in absentee voting. So absentee voting, the worry, right, is that someone is gonna get ballots that don't belong to them. Or someone's gonna get ballots from somebody else and steal their ballots. Or this ballot harvesting has become a kind of a popular term. We do have mechanisms in place to identify a couple of things. One is if we get a lot of ballot requests from the same place, that throws a trigger, a red flag to us immediately. It's built into the system. If we get more than 5 requests from the same IP address, we instantly get a notification. What's going on? It's not always wrong. Sometimes it's a library. Sometimes it's a retirement home, and everything. So it's not always a bad thing. I'm not trying to say it is, but we do have mechanisms in place to stop that. Good or bad, vote by mail, the main identifier for your vote by mail ballot is your signature. That's one, that we sent it to you, and we sent it to your address. Two, that we got it back and it has your signature on it. The signature matches what we have on file. Those are the main things. In order to get a ballot that does not go to the address in which you're registered, you must make that request in writing. You must sign that request. So we have a written request from you saying, I need my ballot in Ohio. And we will do that. You're allowed to do that. When it comes back though, we're still gonna verify that we have the signature on that ballot matches the signature on our record for you. So is there, have we had circumstances where people have, usually it's husbands and wives, honestly. The wives try and sign the husband's ballot like they do their checks. Sorry. So usually it's, or we had a circumstance where a mother signed for her daughter who was off at school. We find that, we really do. Signatures are a good identifier, they really are. Are they perfect? No. But is it where you're gonna see a bunch of fraud in it? No. Most of the fraud is family related. It's when a family member tries to help another family member out. That's most of what we see when we see this issue. Yes, Mark?
Quick question. One of the provisions of SB 524 was the creation of the Office of Election Crimes and Security. Has Manatee County ever referred a case to that office?
We have, yes. There's been probably, since they were created, five, maybe 6 cases or 6 things that we've sent them. Most of them are petition related. So as I've told you, all of these petitions for marijuana and abortion have been going around. They need 890,000. You know how they get that 890,000? They pay people to go out and get them. They pay them really well. Having said that, they're not allowed to pay them per petition. It's not like they can say, here's, you give me 100 petitions, I give you $5 a petition. But they can make them hit quotas kind of thing. So what we've seen, and most of what we sent them, is all of a sudden we get a stack of petitions and they aren't really good. The signatures are bad, but you look at the handwriting on them and all the handwriting seems to match up pretty good. So we've sent several of those. There's one case where there's a petition maker in Southwest Florida between about Manatee County and Lee County who had an inordinate amount of dead people sign his petition. So triggers like that, I mean, we see it. I mean, the system won't let us take it for someone who's died. And so we have sent probably 4 or 5 cases like that. There have been a couple of people that voted in multiple states. We've sent probably 2 or 3 of those. Some of that, honestly, though, when I haven't heard any of the results of any of their research. That is one of the things I wish they were a little quicker, but as I'm sure you understand, the hand of justice is slow. So I don't know what the outcome of any of this is or will be. I did hear on a couple of them it was like a father-son junior issue. Wasn't really the same person. It's just when you're talking about that number of people, you're gonna have that kind of confusion. So I don't know exactly how many we sent. It's probably in the 5 to 6 range, and most of it is petition related.
My question is about the voter rolls, and like you mentioned, it is a lot of work to maintain the voter rolls and make sure the people that should be voting are able to vote. When you explain the program where Manatee County is enrolling non-eligible voters to the voter rolls, it almost sounds like, there's a program that is proud of for Manatee County. If I understand.
I'm not sure we don't intentionally register any non-eligible person to vote, and if we were, I definitely wouldn't be proud of it.
Where you say, did you say earlier that people between age 16 to 18?
Okay, that's,
It was almost like legal register years ago, even though you can't vote for 2 more years maybe, and you get the privilege of coming in when there's a poll.
so that program, that's a state law. That's not a Manatee County thing. It's called pre-registration. Going back into the 60s, you were allowed to register when you turned 17. Again, it was pre-registration. You're basically allowed to fill out the paperwork. We would put you in the system. Of course, your date of birth goes with that. Until you turned 18. Once you turned 18, we would send you your voter registration ID, and then you were allowed to vote at that point. I don't remember when exactly, it was probably around 2004, 2006, they made that 16. Instead of 17, they made it 16. And the logic of it was when you went to go get your driver's license, it was easy for you to register to vote at the same time. It's not, it's a law, it's not a Manatee thing. You're allowed to pre-register, is what it's called, pre-register to vote at 16. You are allowed to be a poll worker as soon as you're registered to vote. There are a lot of counties that do it. This is not an us thing, this is a state thing. It's just legally allowed to be a poll worker at 16 if you're registered to vote. We don't have a lot of them. Most of them are 17 or 18, or 17.
Right. So again, going back to your challenge of keeping the voter rolls clean, is there any activity or any movement to change that so that these people are not sitting on the voter rolls up to 2 years before they can actually vote? Is there any activity to change that?
To change the law?
To change that law?
I have not heard of anybody trying to change that law. Again, you're technically not on the vote. I mean, you don't show up in the numbers. Like if you were to run a report of how many people are registered to vote, that person is not considered, but they are pre-registered.
Another question here, go ahead.
Hello, thank you for coming. My question is, the NGO, non-governmental organization called Florida Supervisors of Election. Every SOE in the state of Florida, all 67 counties, are members of this organization. I want to know what benefit is each county getting from the membership of the SOE belonging to this organization?
So you're talking about the Florida Supervisor of Elections Association. It's an association of supervisors of elections. They have conferences where they get together and they talk about the new laws. The Secretary of State, the Department of State come and explain the new laws. There are sessions they have on different things, but mostly surrounding new law. Recently, there've been a lot of new laws, so a lot of it is focused on the new laws.
But that NGO, it's not like a state-sanctioned NGO, is it? I mean, if our SOEs need training, they would get it from the state, not this NGO.
The state does not provide training. They would not provide training to us. This is the way we get it from the state. It's just a professional association. I can tell you, I know the clerk's office has one, the tax collector has one, the property appraiser has one, the county has one, municipal officials have them. All they are intended to do is allow people with similar issues and similar job descriptions to come together and figure out how to do things better and more efficiently. They have no say in how things are done. They just, it's more of an association to allow people to come together.
Well, a few years ago, when their website, one of their main goals was to get ERIC implemented in every county. And that turned out to be a disaster because every voter roll in every county was inflated after ERIC was used.
Actually, Eric dropped our voter rolls quite a bit, probably in Manatee County by about 2,500, 3,000 people as soon as Eric was instituted. The truth is, I know the association did lobby for Eric when it came out. It wasn't a county by county thing, it was a statewide thing. The counties could not opt in or opt out of ERIC. It was done at the state level. It wasn't something that we could even, had no choice in the matter, one way or the other. I do know the association did, like I said, lobby for ERIC, because one of the things that we just don't have access to is nationwide database of where people are voting in other states or registered in other states. We don't have access to that.
Well, the only problem is somebody does have access to it, and they're not on our side, they can make that look any way they want. We had a lower, border roll, it could be a good reason for that, someone else had their finger on the scale. And it wasn't us.
What I meant originally, and what I said originally was, I can't really talk to how good ERIC was, because the only thing I ever saw was what the state sent us. I didn't see the data coming in, it was all done at the state level, which, I mean, what we saw, some of it was good. I mean, it provided us with information we didn't otherwise have. I understand that there is this feeling that ERIC could have been wrong, and it could have been. I wouldn't know. But there is a hole there still. Whether the hole was there while ERIC was there is still a hole there that there's nothing been made to fill.
Well, as far as overall.
So Jack gave the mic to somebody several minutes ago, and two people tried to speak in her place.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Okay, so, I'll ask you, since you've been at this a really long time, have you seen 2000 News?
I have seen 2000 News.
So, maybe not in your official capacity, but because of your experience and so forth, there are so many people that believe the election was stolen in 2020. And I would just be interested what you might want to say, or maybe you don't want to say anything about that, but, you know, it seems as if in Manatee County, it's, you know, maybe everything's much better than in other places. Florida certainly did a lot after what the 2000 election, Channing Chasney. But, you know, in other places, it's, you know, obviously there's a lot of funny business going on, and a lot of people just don't trust elections, supervisor elections. I know people that refuse to vote now because they don't believe in the integrity of the system. So, I don't know. Anyhow, it needs to be, once again, it needs to be addressed.
Sure. So, I'll talk about two things. One is 2000 Mules specifically was talking about what is called now ballot harvesting. The idea, at the time 2000 Mules was released, in Florida ballot harvesting was not illegal. So part of the problem is ballot harvesting has a wide definition. Different people use it for different terms. So I know someone who lived in a condominium association, was president of the condominium association. And a week before the election, he would go down and people in that association would hand him their ballot, sealed and signed. He would bring back 30 or 40 ballots, put them in the box. Was not illegal.
3 o'clock in the morning?
No. And I understand. I'm saying that is technically ballot harvesting.
Right.
What most people are worried about is not that so much as they're worried about the people that are going house to house, getting their ballot before they voted, or helping them vote it, taking their ballot and returning a large quantity at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever. I can tell you we did not see that in Manatee County, and I don't think we really saw much of it in Florida, but definitely not in Manatee County. Talking about whether or not the election was stolen, all I can talk about is Manatee County, honestly. Florida a little bit, but mostly just Manatee County. The rest of the state, the rest of the country, I only know as much as you do by reading the news, the articles, the opinions, all of that stuff. I don't know any more about it. I can tell you that I think Manatee County has very safe and secure elections. I don't think there's a lot of fraud in Manatee County. And the fraud you see, most of the fraud we see that we find is, again, it's husbands and wives, it's family members that are going a little bit above and beyond what they should in order to to get that vote counted. I don't know that that answers your question, but I really can't talk outside of Manatee County because I don't know enough of the facts.
Hi, Scott. Sally Pogram. I would like to go back to what you were telling us about the teenagers that can pre-register. That's a question that I have. 16 and 17-year-olds that pre-register to vote. Where exactly are those numbers? We know what those numbers are because we get reports monthly, but where are they parked on the rolls right now? They're not in inactive, but where are they?
They're just it's a classification in our system
So?
called pre-registered.
Then they're not additive to any of the other categories, right?
Just pre-registered.
Okay, so when they turn 18, does the system automatically put them in as an inactive or an active voter?
Puts them in as an active voter.
Active voter.
And it automatically creates a voter information card that we send to the voter. It's an automatic step. It's,
Right.
yeah.
So when they first register as a 16 or 17-year-old, they're issued their voter ID at that time?
Their ID number is generated at that time.
They're not issued the ID. They don't get a physical ID.
No, I know, it's a voter ID number, the numeric. Okay, good, that answers that question, because I always was wondering where you put them. Thank you.
Okay, guys, okay, we got one more question, okay? Who's got money? How bad do you want to ask it?
We donated.
Yeah, that always drives up the questions. All righty.
She's right there.
You got money? Did you put money in the pot?
Yeah, I do it at pot.
Oh, okay, just wanted to check. We did get money out of this one.
Just one question. I get an absentee ballot. Now, you said things quit in 2022. Am I gonna have to reapply to get an absentee ballot?
If you were getting absentee ballots before, December 2022, all absentee ballots requests were canceled. There were no, January 1st, 2023, there were no absentee ballots, vote by mail requests on file. So if you want an absentee ballot, and that goes for everybody, if you have not re-requested since January 1st of 2023, you must do so in order to get a vote by mail ballot in 2024.
How do we do that? Call you?
You can call our office, you can go to our website, on our website, you can go through and do it through the website, you can call our office and they'll do it right over the phone. You have to provide either your driver's license number or the last 4 digits of your social security number in order to make that request.
Okay.
I have a burning question. Is it possible to have one-day voting?
Did she pay?
Yes, I did.
Sorry, is it possible to have 1 day voting?
Yeah, I mean, like suggesting that, we do, let's just go back to one-day voting in person.
Precincts, small precincts.
Yeah, is that even doable from your point of view?
No.
No?
Not anymore.
Not anymore?
Not anymore.
Why?
There's 2 reasons. One is people don't want it. And that's my proof that people don't want it.
Yeah.
2, we can't get the precincts anymore.
Oh.
One of our biggest challenges now is getting physical precincts. It hasn't always been that way, but now it is a huge challenge for us. The reason? There's a few reasons, but one is churches don't want to do it anymore. We still have a lot of churches. I'm not saying all churches, but we've had a lot of churches that have said no thank you. And for several reasons. One is they started a school. They don't want to have kids on their campus and have a bunch of voters coming in now. I totally get it. Another reason, by state law, in order to be a polling place, you must, on election day, allow anybody on your property to campaign. I'll be honest, I haven't said this yet, but this abortion amendment specifically really worries me. I think we're going to have quite a few churches that decide they don't want to be polling places anymore. Once they find out, they must allow people on their property that says, vote yes for abortion, or whatever the sign's going to say. They're not going to like that, and they're not going to want it. And so we, as a society, as a community centers have gone by the wayside. So we rely very heavily on churches and things like that. And schools came up, I've heard that. We currently don't use any schools. And the reason we don't use any schools is because the schools aren't willing to close their buildings to the kids on election day. In order to use a school now as a polling location, everybody has to get background checked before they go into the secured area. The secured area, since, I don't know, about 2-3 years ago, they put a fence around the entire, basically every school in Manatee County has a fence around the entire property. To get inside that fence, you generally have to go through what they call their Viper system, which is where they scan your ID, your driver's license. What all it checks, I have no idea, but we can't require voters to go through that in order to vote. So schools, unless we can talk the schools into shutting down on election days, we can't really use the schools. So my short answer is no. I don't see the genie going back in that bottle. And again, I don't think the mass of voters want it to, and that's my proof. I do see, honestly, I think vote by mail is going to dip from what we had in 2020. And I think early voting is going to jump from what we had in 2020. That's my prediction. Because people still like in-person voting. Early voting allows people to vote earlier, but still be in person.
Has anybody talked about making Election Day a federal holiday?
It has come up several times.
Right.
Now, what I'm going to say is a federal holiday doesn't actually fix my problem, because that's one day. That's November. It's not the primary. It's not the PPP, because those don't happen on the same day across the country. Could be a state holiday. That helps. But if I have a special election, it puts me back in a big box. So it's been talked about. It hasn't gone very far yet.
So how would you get that to be a thing? Would you have a petition signed by thousands of people to get it on the ballot? How would you make that happen?
You could either A, get 900,000 people to sign a petition in the state of Florida and make it a constitutional amendment. Probably not your best bet. Best bet would be to go to your representative, your state representative, your state senator, and say, I think this is important. Talk to enough of them, convince them, get the law changed. That schools must have a records day, I don't care what they call it, on the days of voting, whether it be the PPP, the primary, or the general. The primaries in August is usually not the issue, it's the general and the PPP.
Because they do it in other states.
I have heard that they do, yes.
I came from Connecticut 2 years ago. I was voted at the local schools.
I know Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, most of Georgia's is in fire stations. Having said that, understand that there's a big difference between Connecticut and Georgia and Florida. Remember I talked about the smallest county had about 4,500 registered voters? Miami has a 1.5 million. We're at 265,000. Even if we used every high school, that's not enough. We would have to use every high school. The problem is, if I used every high school and middle school, the middle schools are usually too close to the high schools. It doesn't make sense to use both of them, and then the elementary school. So it still doesn't fix the problem. It just drastically helps it.
In Texas, we had them at the elementary schools.
Yeah, but that's Texas and they lost.
Yeah, but we're big. Everything in Texas is big.
Well, and honestly, I remember when I was in Indiana, I remember going to the high school gymnasium with my parents. And this was back when they went into this little thing and they pulled a lever and the curtain closed behind them. I remember doing that. And it was a high school gymnasium. So the idea is not foreign. It's just with the Lunsford Act and the secured school security, the way it's been the last 10 years, those aren't really currently options for us unless they're willing to close.
Okay, one last question, John. You've been putting money in the pot.
We put money in the pot, so we want to get another question. I mean, one thing that I've been curious about, which is one thing in Florida, the drop boxes. Are they brought in when the polls close, so that no one can drop
mail or ballots in at 3 in the morning? Because
So we
I don't
have-
understand why that wouldn't be.
Right, we have a drop box at our office, and then a drop box at every early voting site. Those drop boxes are emptied every night at the close of polls. For early voting, the close of polls is usually 6 p.m. For our office, we kind of match that. So at 6 p.m., those drop boxes are closed. We empty them, we count the vote by mail ballots, they are returned to our office. They are not accessible or opened again until the next morning when polls open.
Are they monitored?
They are monitored. By law, they must be monitored.
So that's not the, going to the 3 in the morning situation, that's not the case.
It's not
in
an
that
option.
state, which doesn't make any sense. Yeah, the post goes, we should put.
All right. Since I'm the last one with the microphone and I don't have a question. Thank you. Okay, before everybody gets up and goes crazy, well, or just gets up. Some of you were crazy while you were still sitting down. Just one thing, has anybody heard of The Fall of Minneapolis? It's a movie.
Yes.
Okay, it's on YouTube. It's an hour and 42 minutes.